The Nerdcast Empire is on the air, albeit a day late, with this special Monday edition of Music Weekly here on the Nerdcast Empire. Great to have you along with us. I am Matt here in the studio. Thanks to a power outage yesterday and a potential internet outage last night, we had to postpone this by 24 hours, but we are back with the best in rock and metal music for the week of June the 28th, and we got a lot of great stuff for you once again, as we do each and every week here on the Nerdcast Empire. Great to have everybody along with us again, a day late, back to our old Music Mondays that we used to do, but now we are live on Monday on Twitch. Of course, you can catch us on the VOD, on the YouTube VOD, or of course on your favorite podcast source each and every week. Joining me in the studio, the guy who puts all the lists together each and every week, it's Mike. Mike, how's it going?
It is going. We are wrapping up the second quarter of 2024. Can't wait to see what's in store for the rest of the year.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, and we're almost to the halfway point of a year of doing this. We are episode 22 of Music Weekly, so We are 4 weeks away from the halfway point. Not just joining us in chat this week, but joining us live from Parts Unknown. It's Chris. Chris, how's it going?
Going all right, man. Layovers and Parts Unknown are no joke, man. What's it been, over a month since I've been able to hop in, but glad to be back. Before we get rolling with this week in new music, I just want to give a shout out to a fellow content creator, Fred Rock. That's FREDDROCK on Twitch. I've been working a little bit in my time off away from the streams here to kind of revamp our Discord channel, and he's put a lot of help into it. He's got many more followers than us, much more successful at this, but it's nice of him to give me the time of day, and we've been messaging back and forth and trying to get everything kind of streamlined here for everybody down the road.
Yeah, big shout out to him, and big thanks to Chris for kind of taking on that task. Eventually, we'll be able to open up our Discord to everybody who wants to join our Discord. That'll be very awesome, and a lot of really cool things going on there. And a big thanks to Chris for kind of holding things down for us in the chat each and every week, even when his schedule really didn't allow for him to join us live. But he is back with us this week, so we are talking the best in new rock and metal music from June the 28th. Of course, each and every week, Mike will pull a list together of all of the best in rock and metal new releases from June the 28th. And, of course, we'll get that playlist put into the chat. And each and every week, we go through that playlist and we'll pick two of the new albums that we want to spotlight. And, of course, if you're watching on the YouTube VOD, when you see that link pop up in the chat, you'll also see it pop up at the top of your screen. So you can click and go over and be able to check out all of the releases from June the 28th. And you can pick your own choices, or you can just listen to the ones that we recommend each and every week. And, of course, we shout out these bands on social media. We've had a couple of them shout us back out and thank us for talking about their music. Some really awesome stuff out there. So we're always excited to see all this new rock and metal music. And, of course, if you're watching on Twitch, if you're watching on the YouTube VOD, as long as things don't get muted, you'll be able to hear sample tracks of these albums as we pick them. If you're listening on your favorite podcast source, of course, we can't play the music on there, so you're going to want to catch us live. That is the one way to be guaranteed to get a chance to hear the tracks each and every week. So basically, we'll talk about the track, we'll talk about the band, then we'll play the track, and then if anybody has any comments, we can take those comments. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next pick. So with that all said, the kind of how the format of Music Weekly works, we're going to start off with Mike, as we do each and every week. Mike, you have two picks, and a lot of really good stuff this week. Again, a variety of really good music that was not necessarily all the same stuff that we normally pick, which makes it fun. But what do you have for us first this week?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess first and foremost, last week was great.
Yeah.
And I'm beyond excited that a band like Floating Worlds would comment and even point out that they were introduced to Vexing Hex based on our picks. I think that was something going into this I hadn't really considered, is that some of the bands we pick could actually kind of discover new bands based on the work we put in. So that's honestly really, really cool. But as for this week, two new bands. Let's get on with it. Let's see here. There's been kind of this recurring theme lately, I feel like, where you run into these bands that kind of have this retro sound and then weird backstories or in general just like anonymity where you don't know the members of the band, and it turns out they tend to be pretty good. So my first pick this week is actually the debut album from this AOR rock/metal band from Denmark. The band is called Big Sun, and the album is Rite of Passage.
Yeah, it seems to be a growing trend of these guys. Maybe kind of hard to figure out like who they really are or what they've done in the past, and they kind of create these new identities and make this new music. And like you said, almost always when we come across these bands, they've been really good, and this one's no exception.
Yeah, so kind of to my point earlier about them having some interesting backstories. If you check out their Bandcamp, which I recommend you do, they have this really long explanation of kind of their genesis. And I'll just read you the beginning because that's probably all you would want to hear me read to you. Here it goes. We are Big Sun. We only serve ourselves, our order, and the Big Sun. The origin of Big Sun goes back to the beginning of the 19th century and refers to a secret lodge founded by Jean-Baptiste Jules Bernadotte, also known as Karl Johann XIV of Sweden, who before he ascended the throne of Sweden was field marshal under Napoleon. After much internal strife, Jean-Baptiste and Napoleon were reconciled in 1804, and he swore allegiance to Napoleon's fame. That's kind of oddly read, but then again, this is and he swore allegiance to Napoleon. He swore allegiance to his famous quote. I don't know how you do that, but that's what it says. The quote being, "If I had to choose a religion, the sun, as the universal giver of life, would be my God."
Okay.
Hence, Big Sun. That's what they are.
Guess that makes sense.
Yeah. Regardless of the mythology around the band, this band comes off very much like a 70s arena rock band. A lot of different sounds going on, especially vocally. I felt like at times the lead singer sounded like King Diamond, like in songs like The Sun. Then you had songs like Stronger Than Anyone, where the singer sounded a lot like Billy Squier, I thought, which just seemed out of nowhere, but that was kind of the reference that I pulled from it. As you continue on, you have Ra Heractus, which basically sounds like their attempt to write a Rammstein song, which was really cool. And the final track, The Totem, sounds like an 80s soft rock song. They use the organ a lot throughout the album with a very Boston sound, like it felt like the song Foreplay in a lot of ways, which certainly isn't a bad thing. If I was to pick some standout tracks, I would go with I Was Loving You, Stronger Than Anyone, Directions, Maiden Sacrifice. And the song, which I did not tell you in advance, that I would like to play is Stronger Than Anyone, and if you could maybe cue it up to around 38 seconds.
I think we can do that. We can. That's the thing is, sometimes when you're putting these episodes together, it's we engineer it on the fly. That's the fun of live podcasting. But really interesting band, and certainly interested to let everybody hear a little bit about this band. Again, Big Sun. Rite of Passage, and this is Stronger Than Anyone, the third track off this album. Let's listen to that now here on the Nerdcast Empire. Yeah, that's, as I hear that real quick, and then we'll get Chris's thoughts on it, I kind of hear a 70s vibe to it, too. Kind of almost like like Kiss, like I Was Made for Loving You, like that.
Had a real 70s kind of arena rock sound. And I thought vocally that was where I heard the Billy Squier sound.
That makes sense, too.
Like Rock Me Tonight or whatever the song is that he had.
Yeah. I could definitely hear that. But really interesting sound. Chris, your thoughts on Big Sun?
Yeah, you hit it right on the head because they actually made my re-listen list as well. And as I was listening to it, Kiss was immediately where I went. So yeah, that arena rock sound that Mike listed is exactly what I was hearing, and they almost made the cut for me, but not quite.
Yeah, really solid. I know you kind of jumped on those guys pretty early, so I got a chance to listen after you'd picked them. I'm really impressed with what I hear. Definitely want to hear more from these guys. So definitely check out Big Sun, Rite of Passage. Rite de Passage. I don't know. That's how it is.
You see it both ways. Both
yeah.
is rite de passage or rite of passage, which,
But-
same thing. Whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find that, and I'll post the link to that, the YouTube music playlist in our chat for those who want to check out the whole album. And that is Mike's first pick this week. Really good stuff there. As always, you have 2 picks. What do you have for us for pick number 2?
And one final thought on that one,
Yeah.
actually, is I feel like we're encountering more and more of these bands that have that kind of retro wave sound. I feel like it somehow goes hand in hand with the popularity of vinyl and maybe even cassettes making a comeback. Like, that's just the sound you want to hear coming from those media. I don't know, but it's interesting.
Yeah, I think there could be a link to that. So maybe some retro sounds to go with the retro technology that we're getting as well.
So, yeah, moving on to
Can we make a band that religion is dedicated to Suncoast? Is that a thing that we can do?
As long as it's not the one that's open up in Dayton still, because that one.
Which other one's it going to be?
I mean, you know what? There could very well be more of them around.
I got recommended a video on YouTube of this guy, and he mentioned Suncoast in the description, but it was basically him walking around a mall and comparing other like functional mall stores to Suncoast. I don't know why. It was like he went by a Barnes and Noble, which is also kind of surprising there are those left.
Yeah.
And he was just like, this seems a lot like Suncoast used to be. Like, all right, man, whatever.
I wouldn't be surprised if it seems like Suncoast is now dead, and it's kind of surprising it even exists. But yeah,
In hospice.
We need to head back over there, to be honest.
Yeah, it's about time to head back up to Dayton for another
izakaya and all the other
trip.
nonsense there.
It is certainly not nonsense, but again, Big Sun, definitely check them out.
Yeah.
What do you got for pick number 2?
So yeah, moving on. As I'm putting the list together, as I mentioned a lot, I'm pulling up the YouTube videos, and a lot of times the album artwork will be the video with the music set to it, and there'll be an album cover that I'm just like, I don't know what this sounds like yet, but it has to be something I'll enjoy. There's just it just has a certain epic. It just looks like power metal. First off, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it, but that's definitely the case with this one. And as I kind of dug deeper and found out who these guys were, I realized why I, upon hearing them, really enjoyed it. This is the debut album from a progressive metal supergroup. According to their Bandcamp, they're based in Atlanta, Georgia, but it sounds like the people they brought in are from all over the place. The band is called Harpazo, and the album is The Crucible.
This is the second week in a row we've had a pick with a very long album. Like, this is a 70-minute album, which you don't really see a whole lot of now. A lot of the albums check in 45 to 50 minutes, but this is the second week in a row we've had one that's kind of an extended play album. But yeah, I mean, really good stuff. So I certainly understand why they wanted to really put out a strong effort for their debut.
Absolutely. And as I started looking into this, I found their website, and right off the bat, there are some testimonials from various online resources and publications, which kind of tells you where we're headed with this. First off, Heaven's Metal magazine referred to this album as, "This is Christian metal's Les Miserables."
Okay.
So, yeah, we're in for a ride. Sea of Tranquility, which is another site that does a lot of prog reviews, they said The Crucible will be jostling for their Album of the Year honors come at the end of 2024. So, considering that's kind of their wheelhouse and they review a lot of albums, I thought this could be really cool. Come to find out, Harpazo is a Greek word. It appears in the Bible numerous times, translated as caught up or caught away in relation to rapture. So, probably a cool word for my Christian metal concept album, which is what we're looking at here.
Definitely made it a challenge when I started looking those guys up, because that word shows up a lot online.
Yeah, it most certainly does. So as I keep going into finding out about this band, I find out that Gary Werekamp is involved with it, which I've mentioned his prior band before, or I guess current band if they're still around, but that's kind of up for debate. He was from 1992. He was the guitarist, keyboardist, pianist, backing vocalist for Shadow Gallery, band that I absolutely love, and we've discussed them on prior podcasts. You also have DC Cooper from Royal Hunt and Silent Force, Mark Zonder, whose name came up a few weeks back talking about the band Warlord. He was their drummer. And the founder of this band is a writer and guitarist named Mark Centani, who heavily inspired by bands like Dream Theater, Camelot, Avantasia, Arion, Queensryche, and also into prophecies in various religions, and he decided, hey, I want to write a rock opera about these kind of things, whether kind of the combination of religion and prophecy and how that kind of melds with technology in our modern world. And in order to do so, he actually met up with Werecamp, which is probably a good first step, since this guy with Shadow Gallery wrote numerous concept albums and just was really known for that. As you get into the title track and the album in general, you kind of get this mixture of Shadow Gallery, Queensryche from like the Mindcrime era, Avantasia, just exactly what you'd expect it to be. Just not overly heavy. There's a lot going on, but you can still, everything's really clear. You can make out the words really well, and otherwise it's just a very long story. If you're into concept albums, then this is definitely something you'll be into. If not, it may be a bit inaccessible as far as you might find yourself, 5 minutes into an 8-minute song thinking, where are we going with this? Like, where are all the hooks at? I really enjoyed it. Standout tracks to me were Iker, I Am God, The Crucible, Change of Heart Part 1, Ultimatum, and Small Price to Pay. The song that, once again, I didn't tell you that we should play is about 45 seconds into the track Small Price to Pay.
So we will check that out now. As pull that one up on. Oh, there we get a little preview of it. But pulling that up at this moment. This again is Harpazo. The track is the 10th track on this album. It is Small Price to Pay, and we will check that out now here on the Nerdcast Empire.
All the world, those who follow in the name of the Christ will face the edge of Roman swords. Take the mark, crucify, feel the burn, your time has come. Don't be afraid, reject the mark and you will be saved. Stand tall and brave, death or eternal life, here's a small price to pay.
But yeah, I mean, obviously, anytime you're dealing with a concept album, like you said, I think it takes a little time to get into that. I think there are certainly, looking at like the YouTube playlist, there's a couple of songs that people have really gravitated towards. Iker, the first track, has 20,000 plays. I Am God has 121,000 plays, and everything else is between 100 and 300 plays.
Yeah.
So, I think it's one of those things when you have a band like this, getting into maybe a couple of the big hits off the album first, and then that kind of gets you in the door, and then it's kind of the way we kind of look at these bands each and every week. It's, you kind of find that one song that represents the album, and then it's like, okay, I enjoy that. What does the rest of this sound like? So
I think with concept albums, I kind of put them into two camps. There's Mindcrime 1 and Mindcrime 2. Mindcrime 1 was a bunch of amazing songs that had radio playability that fit together into a story. Mindcrime 2 was a cool story that had some pretty good songs written to fit it.
Yeah.
Like, it kind of felt like, not to suggest that Mindcrime 1, the story didn't come first, but it just so happened that they had a lot of really catchy songs. This trends more toward the Mindcrime 2, where it's the songs are good, but it's clear that first and foremost it was, I want to tell a story.
Yeah.
And honestly, if you want to go the Christian metal route, I think concept albums probably come off a little less cheesy maybe than nothing against Stryper. They're an amazing band, but I think it's going to be hard to pull people in to Stryper sometimes because of just how overt it is. Whereas this telling a story, I think it's more appetizing to people who otherwise probably wouldn't give it the time of day.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely have a good sound. Definitely looking forward to checking out more of those guys. Chris, any thoughts on Harpazo?
Yeah, definitely love it when I don't mind when there's a heavy focus on the story. I mean, we've seen bands come through that have made whole video games and 1,000-page novels just to go with their album. So definitely not against that, and kind of focusing on the track that we played a little bit. They definitely were able to do layered vocals correctly.
Yeah.
It doesn't always come through the best, but man, they nailed the sound they were going for sure.
Yeah, I always enjoy that. There was another band that unfortunately didn't make the cut this week that I thought really nailed the layered vocals. Unfortunately, it was kind of hit and miss on their album. Like the good tracks were really good, and the other tracks were just kind of slow and not really exciting. So I didn't end up picking that band. But they really certainly did harmony well, just like this band did. So.
While the subject matter doesn't really fit with Shadow Gallery, sound-wise, this kind of feels like a spiritual successor. And when you mentioned the layered vocals, that's something they did really well and a lot. And I think it makes it so much more pleasing to listen to. But obviously, I'd always recommend Shadow Gallery to people, and this is no different.
Yeah, so definitely check out Harpazo, Mike's second pick of this week. Throwing out the parts unknown for Chris. Chris, you got a couple picks this week as well. What do you have for us first?
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure after such a long hiatus, but honestly, the two bands I've got lined up kind of made things easy. As you guys kind of mentioned, it was a little bit of a lighter week than weeks in comparison that I've been kind of in the chat, so I got off a little easy this week. I had a little less that I needed to sift through as far as the final picks go. First up for me is a trio from Melbourne, Australia, Banks Arcade, with their latest 6-track, 25-minute EP, A Muse. They're listed as metalcore, but I think this is one of those cases where once you dive in, you hear so much more. And I was kind of happy to find that the arcade portion of their name wasn't just there for looks. There was a healthy dose of electronic beats mixed in with their angsty backing tracks and lyrical content that made whatever is left of my high school or early college days, Chris, very happy. The vocals from Joshua O'Donnell border on poppy at times, and I mean that in the best connotation. It's not always brought in as a positive, but to me, it adds this extra layer of catchiness, especially in regards to the choruses of songs like Faded AF and Lost Cause. Speaking of Faded AF, it's both the track I've selected to show off for the listeners, and it just happened to be the song that Mike selected for his playlist. I don't know if this is the first time it's happened, but both tracks that Mike selected for the playlist for both of my bands wound up being the ones that I went with. I was happy to see that commenters on that YouTube video shared the same sentiment as I did, where it was kind of a feeling of, I hadn't heard of this band until now, but man, did I pick the perfect first track. And it's also where I think the EP really gains traction. You've got Faded AF, which is a heavy, albeit melodic and slow-building single of a track, followed by Lost Cause, which has more of a riff-driven groove that caught my ear instantly. And then the cherry on top of the trio of tracks is No Future, because quite possibly the heaviest track on the EP as a whole, and it really shows off the aggression that they're capable of. So,
Yeah, so
as other comment...
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was... It's some of the other commenters on their videos, I don't really understand like how their viewer levels aren't in the millions yet, honestly. So I hope that we can help a little bit. I know Mike brought up how we've had some comments on the YouTube videos about these bands, maybe even being introduced to other bands, maybe even meeting people they might want to bring on tour. So in playing this, I kind of hope that we get that name Banks Arcade spread far and wide, because this might be in contention for one of my favorite new bands that I've come across this year.
So let's listen to a little bit of Banks Arcade now, and we're going to listen to Faded AF, the third track off of the 6-track EP. So let's check that out now here on the Nerdcast Empire.
I don't wanna make love, I don't need to be free. I just wanna name right, watching on the TV. Yeah, I'm just a lost kid, want the world to see me. If I had it my way, wouldn't wanna be me. Would you look at that? Everybody sick again. Can you look at that? Murder on me in the night. Want the world to end, no one my president. I changed my mind, it's the same old story. Said I don't want love, then I love somebody. Don't want much, and my mind starts running.
Yeah, and listening to these guys, because obviously I listened to this track when Mike put out his playlist. This is kind of one of those reasons why I was glad when Chris wanted to be a part of this podcast, because when you talked about like kind of how this resonated with the you of high school and early college days, like I think that is kind of an important piece that we miss when it's just Mike and
Yeah.
I on this podcast, because I feel like because we're only 3 years apart, our and we're older as well. Our music tastes are different. Come from a different generation. There are things that resonate with us
Well, and
differently.
I think we were brought up on music even older than what our age
Yes.
would normally suggest, so we kind of trend even more back that other direction, maybe.
Yeah, because I mean, I think these guys are good. Like, it didn't jump out at me, but I think it is because maybe of the electronic nature, and even it almost to me sounds a little like the vocals sound a little modern country. Like some of the, and I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just there's a little bit of like something that would be country pop or country rock or something like that from the modern era that maybe wouldn't catch my ear. But I can definitely see people who are, maybe 10 years, 15 years younger that kind of grew up in a different era of rock really resonating with what these guys are doing. And I think they clearly do it very well. Like I said, it wouldn't really jump out at me, but I can see where somebody who was younger would definitely maybe attach to that. Any additional thoughts, Mike?
Yeah, I would agree. I thought it was kind of funny when I Googled them the first time and their website came up, and the description under their website address on Google says, Banks Arcade, heavy metal boy band. Like, oh, okay. You can definitely hear a lot more modern sound to their music, which
Yeah.
is fine. I'm cool with that. I think it's more the vocals that aren't really my style. That being said, I did have them as one of the better artists for this week, so
Yeah,
that
definitely.
says something. Certainly wasn't offensive by any means, but I could see where that sound. Maybe I don't listen to enough like Sirius XM, but this sounds like something that would be playing regularly on Octane, and
Yes.
maybe it is, and I just don't know that.
I could
I could hear that.
Like it would fit perfectly, but yeah, I don't know what separates them from bands you do here on a regular basis.
And I think that's to Chris's point, where it is a little surprising these guys aren't more out there, because it does feel like something that should be playing in regular rotation on modern radio
Yeah.
or on Sirius XM. Feels like it would definitely fit in on Octane, or maybe even some of the other, like, was it Sirius XSU
XM.
or whatever it is, Sirius XMU or whatever it is.
One of those.
One of those channels that's like they play kind of an, I don't want to say alternative, that's not the right word, but something that's maybe more college age rock of the modern
Yeah.
era. So, but yeah, it's like I said, that's why having Chris here is so important, because I think having a younger perspective, a different perspective, kind of spotlights bands like this that are clearly doing great work, and certainly hope that people will give these guys a chance and get their work out there. But really good stuff for the first pick from Chris. Banks Arcade. Chris, you got anything else to say about those guys? You can. Otherwise, let's move on to your second pick.
No, we can go ahead and head up to my second pick, because it's kind of the same feel. Like I really hope that we can help gain even more traction for these guys. Next up for me, metal group originating from Virginia, and that's Devolution, with their 10-song, 39-minute debut album, Deceiver Believer. When looking up the background for this band, I was just stunned by the amount of huge names of both bands and artists that appeared on there. Reading straight from the band's official site, you find out that the band started as a dream of two friends, guitarist Nate Beberdick and drummer Eric Tyser. Originally touring under the name Deviation, they toured for a few years, and they even opened up for the Burn the Priest era Lamb of God. As is typical, life happened, families were formed, careers pulled away from the extracurriculars, but the two pals never fully strayed from one another or their musical dreams. They wound up reuniting down the road, and after connecting with an Australia-based producer, added members John Howard, the vocalist of Threat Signal, and the former bassist, guitarist, and backing vocalist of Fear Factory, Christian Old Wolbers. I'll get into the actual album, but if you check out their bio, you'll find connections to Sevendust, Meshuggah, and even Metallica. So as we've seen time and time again in the metal scene, it's a very small world. And I was honestly surprised I didn't see a reference to Bumblefoot or Jeff Scott Soto mixed in there somewhere with how many times their names pop up on our list. The album itself opens up with a short orchestral instrumental, As Above Is Below, which is nice, and I'm a sucker for those ancient religious references. Sometimes those orchestral intro tracks like this can just be easy filler or kind of a cheap lead up. But here I think it's used perfectly, as it's a little bit of a foreshadowing as the band actually utilizes some of that orchestral instrumentation within some of their tracks. The first real track, Fear by Design, the band lays it all out between clean vocals, harsh vocals, instrumental sampling, like I mentioned, thudding machine gun drums, and heavy riff-driven backing tracks. They kind of give us the template right from the get-go of everything they're capable of. Other tracks throughout the album, like The Voiceless, might lean heavier into the harsh vocals. The title track leans more toward the clean. Ancient Sky plays with vocal layering, like we mentioned with some other bands. And the final track, Shadow and Light, shows they're not afraid to slow things down. But all of that you kind of get on track 2. It kind of sets the tone. The vocals were interesting at times. They were giving me kind of Mike Patton vibes. And then during some of the choruses, they even gave me some of the angst-driven tones that bring me back to new metal or post-grunge acts like Linkin Park. I won't drag on for too long, but if I've got one final note, it's that everyone should check out, at the very least, their cover of Depeche Mode's Enjoy the Silence. It's kind of a chef's kiss, I'd say, off of the whole album. So I think you've got a little sample lined up here, the title track, Deceiver Believer. So hopefully everyone enjoys Devolution.
Yeah, let's check these guys out. We'll play, as you mentioned, the title track. This is Deceiver Believer, the 4th track on that same album from Devolution. So let's check that out now here on the Nerdcast Empire.
This was everything I've hated and more. Just take me away from this life. And you said worry I'm out of control, but you're not gonna save me. You're not gonna save me. You're not gonna change me. This twisted fairy tale has become a nightmare. You're not gonna break me. You're not gonna make me. But don't need to be said, just let me live my own life. Around and around I go.
Yeah, these guys also have a modern vibe to it, but I think of the two bands, this was one that was much closer for me as far as picking them. Kind of much more in line with kind of what maybe I listen to in modern music. So I really I really did dig this album and certainly had considered it when I was going through. I do have one comment. It's funny that they were Deviation. Like, there's got to be a band out there called Standard Deviation, right? Like,
As many like math rock bands as there are out there,
right?
There's no doubt.
I would have to assume like some sort of prog rock band out there that's going by Standard Deviation. But no, these guys got a good rock sound to them. I think it's another group that you would like to see them kind of take off. But really enjoyed that track and what I've gotten to hear from the album. So certainly looking forward to catching more of what they've got. Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's definitely a band I want to get more into for sure. Could definitely hear the Chester Bennington in the vocals there. Like that felt pretty pronounced. It's kind of interesting. I feel like lately we've come across a lot of Virginia-based metal bands. Clearly the metal scene down there is kind of thriving right now.
Yeah, that's great to see. I mean, we sometimes on this show really get wrapped up in a lot of European metal bands, myself especially. But it's great that there's a lot of great rock and metal being performed right here in the US of A. And a chance to check these bands out, as we mention each and every week. If you like something you hear on the show, and this band is somewhat local to you, go see them live, buy their merch, support these bands. That is what will allow them to keep doing the things they're doing and keep releasing these great albums. But definitely check that out. 2 great picks from Chris this week. I've got 2 picks as well, and lot of great stuff to choose from. I started off with a band that just this to me, like, this isn't the right way to describe them, but this is just kind of how I felt about the album. If there was a such thing as like easy listening metal, this first band would be that, because when I listened to their album, I got through the whole thing and it was just like such a great, easy listen from beginning to end. There was nothing in the album that was like, oh, I don't know if I like this track. It was so good from beginning to end. The band is Chaser, and the album is Small Victories. They are a melodic skate punk band from Orange City / Huntington Beach, California, depending on where you look online. These guys are just really, really good. Clearly, a love of punk rock. You can definitely hear the Bad Religion influence. You can hear some Offspring influence in there, which those are two of my favorite rock bands. So, of course, I'm going to dig what these guys are doing. They're formed back in 2000. It's just a really easy listen. It was something great to listen to in the background while I was working. But I think that if you're a fan of that punk rock, modern punk rock that maybe leans a little bit more rock than punk, I think you're really going to dig this. And certainly if you're a fan of Bad Religion or The Offspring, I think you're going to find something on this album that you really will enjoy. I thought the whole album was standout. I think if you had to pick 3 standout tracks, like Fault Line, Stay Gold, and the one we're going to listen to a little bit of, Brand New Enemy. But really excited to find these guys. Definitely want to hear more from Chaser and their album Small Victories. So we're going to play a little bit of that now after I post the album in the chat. And again, this is the first track off of this album, Chaser's album Small Victories. This is Brand New Enemy. So let's check that out now here on the Nerdcast Empire.
Once again to be let down. We're falling down now on stable ground. And the moment all the monsters swing, a brand new enemy will rear its head and start to fade. Yeah, yeah, so far to go until we get control. We need a better way of understanding this life. A fight, a road to make it right. This is our turning point to change for better now.
Another way that they're very much like Bad Religion is the album is 39 minutes long and 13 songs. So that is also very Bad Religion-like. But Mike, obviously I know you're a big fan of Bad Religion, so I'm curious to get your thoughts on Chaser.
Yeah, and I think that's part of my enjoyment of Bad Religion, and certainly it applies to this band too, is there's just something quick, to the point, and ultra catchy about the music. Like, there's no barrier to entry. It's just, you can sit down and listen to it, and it's enjoyable and nice, easily digestible bursts, and I think that definitely is the case here. You could say the same about The Offspring in a lot of cases. What caught my attention looking into them was the fact that they actually have a single on their Bandcamp that's a Bad Religion cover of Skyscraper. So, if that's the kind of music that's inspired them, then I'm certainly going to enjoy it.
Yeah, no question about that. Really good stuff from them. Chris, your thoughts on Chaser?
Yeah, I kind of want to go back. I feel like we've had at least one act of easy listening metal prior, so I kind of want to figure out what that was. But no, I can definitely appreciate when a band is here for a good time and not necessarily a long time. There's no point in overstaying your welcome if you can just fit it all in that short time span.
I feel like so many of the albums we choose, I mean, we've already mentioned Mike had one this week that was over an hour. I had one last week that was like an hour and 20 minutes or something. When we get into a lot of this progressive rock, I feel like sometimes you got 10-minute songs and 8-minute songs. Like, this band can get what they need to get done in 2 or 3 minutes, and I appreciate that. It's a nice change of pace from some of the ones that we picked. But definitely check out Chaser. Really like those guys. I thought their album was outstanding. Small Victories is the album. So I've got 2 picks, as always. My second pick this week, we're headed overseas because we've got to have at least one pick outside of the U.S. This band was formed in 2003 in Poland. This is a band that actually Mike has one of their previous albums, so I'll certainly let him kind of talk a little bit about that when we get to that point. It is Crystal Viper with their new release, The Silver Key. This is their 9th studio album, but it's their first one since 2021. The whole band is great. I think the thing that kind of punches you in the face right out of the gate is Marta Gabriel's vocals. I love when you have a female-fronted rock band and the vocals are just powerful and they really just drive everything. Not that the operatic vocals can't be really great also in bands, but Marta Gabriel just absolutely knocked this out of the park. Definitely heavy metal, power metal. It was interesting reading reviews on Angry Metal Guy because I kind of got the feeling that the reviewer hadn't been real high on some of their previous releases, but we're super excited for this one. Felt like, as they said, the good old days. Just a quote from Angry Metal Guy talking about the performances are tight, Gabriel's vocals are stellar, the flow of the record works well for the first time in a while. Songs even carry themes and riffs from one track to another, building on the momentum and moods from the previous track, specifically in the last 3 songs. The band also sounds as if they enjoyed writing and performing this material, and as we know, anytime you're having fun, it's going to sound great. You're going to do great stuff, and this really feels like great stuff from them. Again, it's another great album beginning to end. The songs that really stood out to me, The Key is Lost, The Silver Key, and Fever of the Gods, the song we're going to hear a little bit of now. But definitely, if you enjoy what you hear, check out Crystal Viper and The Silver Key. And we are going to check out a little bit of them right now. This is the second track off of The Silver Key, Fever of the Gods from Crystal Viper. Let's hear that now here on the Nerdcast Empire. Had to get a little bit of the guitar parts in there as well because, man, the guitarist was absolutely going to town there after the chorus, but really good stuff there. And I know, like you had mentioned, because you're like, that name sounds familiar, that you actually had one of their previous albums, but curious to get your thoughts on them in general and thoughts about this release.
Yeah, kind of to your point, I like when you have the female-fronted band where it's not just pure symphonic, over-the-top operatic vocals. I like when you just still kind of do straight-up metal or even power metal. These guys have a thrash element to them, which I really like. It isn't just power metal bombast. Like, the music is legitimately heavy, and I think that's not always represented well enough or enough in general in metal. So, yeah, I'm totally here for it.
Yeah, really great stuff from Crystal Viper. Chris, your thoughts on Crystal Viper?
Yeah, as soon as I heard it, it didn't surprise me that Mike had a copy of an album of theirs. It seemed right up his alley, and honestly, it was a great listen. That was another one that made my list, my relist. Definitely check these guys out.
Yeah, great stuff from Crystal Viper. Really enjoyed this. Again, their album, The Silver Key. That's going to wrap up our new music of the week. If you're listening on the podcast version of this, we're going to step aside for a break. When we come back, we're going to go into the vault where we will give you some classic albums you need to check out. We'll do that on the other side of this time out here on the Nerdcast Empire. Back on the Nerdcast Empire, Music Weekly, a day late, but we're still here. Don't forget to check out our website, nerdcastempire.com. You can listen to all of our previous podcasts. You can check out our Nerdcast Empire store. Don't forget to check out our Twitch page, twitch.tv/nerdcastempire. We're building toward 50 followers. Again, the sooner we can get there, the sooner we can do cool things like monetizing our podcasts and all that good stuff. We are well on our way. We appreciate everybody for checking us out. Our viewership has been very good on these podcasts since we moved it to Twitch. So please continue to check us out. And if you find something you like, leave us a comment. You can leave us a comment on the YouTube VOD. You can message us through our website. A lot of different ways you can get a hold of us here at the Nerdcast Empire. We're going to be back on Thursday night. We're going to be talking anime music. We're going to be putting together 5 more of our favorite anime themes, and we'll be doing that Thursday night, 7 o'clock, presuming that we don't have any weird power outages or internet interruptions, but we'll be with you. And then Sunday night, we'll be back at our regularly scheduled time for another episode of Music Weekly. We are on to, I believe, July the 5th is the date for our next Music Weekly, and Mike's already took the advantage of our power outage last night to pull that list together. So some really good sounding stuff already on that list. So I think we're really excited to see what we got next week. So you'll have to tune in Sunday night for another episode of Music Weekly. But now it's time to go into the vault, where we are going to spotlight some classic albums. And Chris, we'll let you go first, as we always do. So what do you have for us this week out of the vault?
Yeah, so a while ago, I wanted to kind of pick my own gimmick. So I know you guys have been going with years and letters of the alphabet. So I went with picking soundtracks, which has made things kind of difficult at times, but gave me kind of a creative opportunity in this way. I wanted to kind of bridge the gap between our music topic and our wrestling topic. So I chose the 2000 album WWF Aggression. Wanted to stray away from just picking, a generic album that had a bunch of entrance music, because while entrance music is great when a wrestler's coming out, it's not always the greatest thing to just sit and listen to. But this kind of remedied that. I mean, we just came off the decade of the 90s where you had all these rap and metal groups kind of coming together for movies like Judgment Night and the Spawn soundtrack. And this was kind of in the same vein. You had bands like Run DMC, you had Old Dirty Bastard, Method Man, Snoop Dogg, all kind of collaborating and kind of making their own versions of different wrestlers' entrance musics. And in at least a couple versions of this, I mean, I don't think I'm going to go out of my way to just sit and listen to Mick Foley's music of a car wreck and just kind of that generic riff behind it. But when you put Cool Keith and Old Dirty Bastard on it, then we've got something. And even D-Generation X's theme, which is something, I don't mind. That is something I'm going to listen to just on an average day. I can get into it. But you put legendary Run DMC on the track and you have a whole new song kind of laid out. The opening tracks, I will say, it is kind of front loaded with some of the better tracks. You do get into some kind of easy angles where you've got Mystical writing a rap about Triple H, and it does fall off at times. I don't ever want to see Kane come out to his big Red Machine rap that they do on here. But there's definitely some tracks that I could see that during that time, I wouldn't have been surprised to see The Rock come out to this Method Man version of Know Your Role, or even The Undertaker coming out to this kind of revamped version of his Ministry music. So it was kind of a breath of fresh air. I was kind of sad to see the critical kind of reviews of it that I've read, where they even highlight the Mick Foley theme that I did, saying it's not particularly inventive, whereas, like I said, this is what would make me want to actually sit down and listen to it. I think you will enjoy it more if you're a wrestling fan as opposed to not, but I think it's got a little bit of something for everybody, and it's a creative twist on just wrestling music in general.
Yeah, I think it certainly is a sign of the times. Like that, really, it feels like a time capsule of the late 90s, early 2000s, both in the songs that were picked and the artists that were picked, because they kind of all go hand in hand at that point. Yeah, I think you're going to enjoy it more if you are a fan of those late 90s, early 2000s hip hop. But I also think good on WWE for kind of taking that chance and being willing to kind of step outside the box, because it would be real easy to just release like a metal album, because they were creating so many. I mean, Motorhead was churning out Triple H themes about every other week, so you could have gone that route. But they kind of took a chance here, and I think that's something that, again, if you're a fan of hip hop, you're a fan of some of these artists, I think you're going to definitely find something there that you're going to enjoy. I eagerly await the Def Rebel, not real versions of some of these themes, because the Stone Cold one cracks me up every time I hear it. If you haven't found it, yeah, if you just search it on social media, you will find it. But yeah, I mean, again, it's not necessarily my type of music, but I certainly can appreciate what they tried to do here.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like even by 2000, even though we had kind of the height of the Attitude Era and wrestling was certainly popular, I don't feel like it really had the same mainstream. People didn't look at it the same as they do in 2024. I feel like more now than ever, WWE is like an institution, and the thought of getting this kind of star power on an album today would be like a no-brainer. It'd be super easy.
Right.
It's a little more surprising back in 2000 that they were able to get this done. That being said, I feel like that's one domino that in this new era of WWE we've yet to see fall, and that's that re-emphasis on the music, where you still kind of see some uninspired musical efforts, and I just, they know that it matters. Just looking at Cody's entrance and Rollins sing-along entrance, like clearly that's a big deal. They have the money. Why are we not getting the star power behind that now? I mean, if we were able to just do a throwaway album like this in 2000, why aren't we doing that in 2024?
Yeah, it's definitely one of the things we brought up on the wrestling podcast, that it just feels like a lot of the music nowadays is very much create a wrestler, generic music. And, there's nothing that kills the buzz of the Royal Rumble more than the music starting. Like, okay, who's that? Okay, I know who that is now. And it's like, I shouldn't have to wait for their name to pop up on a video board to know who it is.
There's no reason why Braun Breaker has had as many entrance themes as he has had years in wrestling, but that's kind of where we are.
And his first one, as in many cases, was the best one.
Yeah, it was fine.
And for some reason, they felt the need to continue to give him new ones. So I don't know what they're doing, but definitely check this out. I think, this probably had the benefit of just coming out of the Attitude Era, so wrestling hadn't completely cooled off as it would in the early 2000s, so they still had some cachet to pull these guys in. But like you said, a lot of big name talent on this. If you're a big fan of hip hop and WWE, you probably already own this album. But if you haven't, check out WWF Aggression. Really good pick from the vault this week. Mike, each and every week you go through the alphabet to bring us into the vault. We are getting to the end of the alphabet, which makes your task a lot more difficult. Yeah, you picked a really good one this week, albeit in a limited sample. What do you have for us?
Yeah, as we get closer to the end, I find that I don't really have a lot of options. Turns out my music collection under the letter U is not overly extensive. Thankfully, there was this kind of side project band that lasted for a few years that ultimately led to a reunion of one of my favorite bands, so that made this choice pretty easy. I am going with the 2012 album by the German power metal supergroup Unisonic. The album is Unisonic.
This might be one of my all-time favorite albums by any band at any time. I listen to this even today I think it's on all my exercise playlists, and it just...
You just remember how good it is.
It's so good.
Brilliant.
Track one to the end, it is just a fantastic album.
Yeah, so kind of going through some background here. The band is comprised of Michael Kiske, who was ex-Helloween, Kai Hansen, who is the founder of Gamma Ray and co-founder of Helloween, who left in 1989. Kiske left Helloween in 1993, so these guys have been long since removed from that band. The band was rounded out by Dennis Ward and Costa Zafiriou. Yeah, there we go.
One.
That's brutal. There are a lot of vowels there. They're from Pink Cream 69, who, oddly enough, is the band that Andy Darris, the current singer of Helloween, originally came from. And Armand Meyer, who is from Gotthard in Asia. Kiske had already worked with Ward and Costa on an AOR project called Place Vendôme back from 2004, which is a Frontiers record creation, which is certainly not surprising. They wanted to form a new band. In doing so, they came up with the name Unisonic, which is kind of based on the idea that they're united musicians, but all had different backgrounds and countries. They started in 2010, which were actually some of the first live shows that Kiske played since leaving Helloween in 1993, which is kind of mind-blowing considering how great of a singer the guy is. Kai Hansen ended up joining up with them in 2011. Kind of cool that they reconnected through another band of mine. It's one of my favorites, Avantasia, which is Tobias Sammet's ensemble project that he brings in singers and musicians from all across the metal and power metal landscape. They got together and played on stage for the first time in all these years, and Hansen had pointed out that they had this real strong chemistry still, and the crowd loved them being back on stage together, which is certainly not surprising given Helloween's influence in the metal community and in Europe, certainly. And after doing so, they got together and they played with Unisonic, and this kind of ultimately led to what became the full Helloween reunion that started in 2016 and continues now. So definitely an important band that maybe didn't last all that long, but served its purpose. Musically as far as the music goes, this feels like old Halloween, but maybe even less metally and more kind of catchy AOR-ish. Very accessible with catchy riffs and choruses. Standout tracks, really the whole album's great, but I would mention Unisonic, Souls Alive, I've Tried, Never Change Me, Renegade, My Sanctuary, No One Ever Sees Me. Just listen to the whole album. I mean, if you're a fan of European metal, power metal, Halloween, Gamma Ray, if you like music, check this out.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite albums. I kind of knew when you got to U this might very well be the pick, just because there aren't a ton of U bands out there, as much as I thought you might pick UB40 or...
I think the only other option that I kind of was considering was Unwritten Law.
Yeah, okay.
Their Elva album back from the early 2000s.
But this is such an exceptional album, and like you said, really important because it did kind of spur the comeback of Halloween. And again, I think the reason I enjoy it so much is, like you said, it does sound like old Halloween, but with an AOR twist, which, of course, if anybody's listened to this podcast over the last 22 weeks, know that I really love AOR groups. So it's phenomenal. There's nothing else I can say about it. Everybody should check it out. Chris, I don't know if you had a chance to check it out, but any thoughts if you did on Unisonic?
No, I'm kind of curious. I'm not privy to the whole, I guess, history of Halloween and all that. So as far as Kisk kind of leaving and going into this super group, was this more of him kind of playing the music or the version of Halloween that he wanted to play, or did it not jive with some of his other members, or how all did that happen?
If I remember correctly, Kai Hansen left in '89 because he thought they were kind of veering a little too far away from metal, and that was more his thing. So he went off and started Gamma Ray. At that point, Kisk was kind of the man running the show, I think, in large degree, and he definitely wanted to take them into more of a poppy direction. And if you listen to albums like what was it? Pink Bubbles Go Ape, is that the one? And Chameleon, those are kind of his last two with the band. They have some interesting songs on them. They're good, but they're just not super heavy. Chameleon has a song called Windmill, which almost feels like a country song. Like, it's so just out of left field from Halloween. And the rest of the band eventually just told him, like, dude, I don't think we can make music with you anymore. And that was when they brought in Andy Darris as their lead singer from Pink Cream 69. And evidently Kiss kind of vanished for a while after that.
But yeah, it was good to see that they eventually got that all back together. I feel like I just saw a story.
Well, I saw an old Blabbermouth article from like around the time that Unisonic got going and Hansen joined them. And he basically said, like, it blew his mind that for all these years you didn't have Kisk doing anything meaningful. Like, he was around kind of doing projects here and there, but not really performing live and not really in a band that people cared about or that sold really well. It just seemed like a crime considering how talented he is. And I mean, you kind of say the same about both of them, honestly.
Yeah, no question about it. But like I said, in the end, it all worked out. It just took a long time to finally get there. But
it's one of those weird instances where when I read up about their history, I think around the time I was picking The Dark Ride for letter H, it kind of felt like that even when the different members left, they didn't really ever hate each other. It was just kind of one of those things where they were like, "Yeah, we're not working together anymore. We don't enjoy this."
Yeah, clearly an agree to disagree. Like, this just isn't going to work.
Yeah.
And so it was great that they eventually kind of put that back together. But like I said, I love this album. Definitely check out Unisonic. You buy Unisonic. It's definitely one that when and if we get to 2012 would have been certainly consideration for my picks for that year. But we're on to 1986 for my vault pick, and a lot of great choices. This is the time of the week where we go through all the stuff I didn't pick, and Mike finds more stuff that I didn't pick that is on 1986.
Man, I really should have compiled a list. I was thinking.
Because there was a ton of good stuff this week. Cinderella's Night Songs. You had Van Halen's 5150, which certainly is a great album. You had Journey's Raised on Radio, which is really great. you also had Poison's "Look What the Cat Dragged In."
Yeah.
One that I really wanted to pick was Bruce Hornsby and The Range, The Way It Is, because it has 2 or 3 of my favorite Bruce Hornsby songs on there. Eddie Money's Can't Hold Back. Megadeth's Peace Sells, But Who's Buying? Came out in 1986. Genesis Invisible Touch. I just picked Phil Collins. Didn't feel like I could turn around and pick Genesis again, but that's a great album. Metallica's Master of Puppets, obviously.
Yeah.
Amazing. Some other ones that were maybe not necessarily serious considerations. You had the Fabulous Thunderbirds' Tough Enough, which has a couple of really great songs on there. Stripers' To Hell with the Devil came out in 1986. And Slayer's Rain and Blood. As we've mentioned probably on this podcast, I'm not a huge Slayer guy, but I've seen Rain and Blood in its entirety live. So, I do have a respect for it, but that came out in 1986. In the end, after considering those and many more that Mike will probably find, came down to Europe. And it's only fitting. I spend so much time in Europe anyway, and we're going to go with the band Europe. And this is the album The Final Countdown, which was released in 1986. And just massive hit songs on this album. Starts off on side 1 with The Final Countdown, which, of course, everybody knows. I looked at the YouTube music page. It's got like 1.5 billion plays. So everybody knows that one. Followed up by Rock the Night, which is a great song. Then they slow it down for Carrie. Come back with Danger on the Track and Ninja to wrap up side 1. Then start right out side 2 with Cherokee, which is a very underrated Europe song. Time Has Come, Heart of Stone, On the Loose, which is another underrated Europe song. And then Love Chaser wraps up the nearly 40-minute album. But these guys are great, and this was such a huge album for them. Peaked at number 8 on the Billboard 200 charts in the United States. Had 5 singles off of this album. Just really, really great stuff. One of their biggest albums for sure that had just a ton of hits on it. So that's why this was my pick. And it's funny that it does mention briefly something that probably doesn't come up enough on this podcast, that the movie Hot Rod. 8 of the 10 tracks from this album were in the movie Hot Rod, which everybody should check out from 2007.
I'm sure I've mentioned that before.
Yeah,
just in talking
the
soundtracks, because that was an amazing soundtrack.
No doubt about it. But definitely check out a lot of great stuff in 86. Going with The Final Countdown from Europe. Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, I guess I didn't realize just how many of their big songs were on this album specifically, but Rock the Night, so good. Time Has Come, just Danger on the Track, just songs you don't maybe think of immediately, but just an outstanding album.
Yeah, it's like I said, there's a lot of really good ones to choose from, but as far as like the quintessential Europe, this really is kind of it. As far as like if you're looking for one to kind of get you in the door, this is a good place to start. Chris, any thoughts on Europe and The Final Countdown?
Yeah, honestly, it kind of surprised me until you announced that you were going to pick it. I found out that I've never really sat down and just listened to a Europe album front to back. So this was kind of a breath of fresh air for me. And one of these days, you really got to give Rachel, could just throw her a bone, because I was for sure you were going to pick the New Kids on the Block their self-titled album. I mean, come on.
There's that's the thing is when we start getting into 1986, well, actually the last couple of years, and Mike and I talked about this in the Discord, like that's an era where obviously I listened to a lot of pop music. I was listening to country music. Like Mike had mentioned, I think last week, one of Alabama's albums was on there, was Mountain Music or one of I can't remember which one it was.
I can't remember now either.
But it's like, like I know we focus on rock and metal, but there's a lot of like pop and country albums in the mid to late 80s that were very influential in my music fandom. So it wouldn't surprise me if I don't look at one of those and say, I'm going to pick one of these. But yeah, I mean, you're getting to the point where now you're in, I mean, I was 1986, I was 7. So it's like, I was listening to a lot of radio. So you're starting to get to songs where it's like, I heard this stuff on the radio when it first came out, and that's kind of what got me into being a music fan. Mike, did you find anything else that I missed in 1986?
I didn't quite catch because I was scanning through the list, everything you'd mentioned, but Van Halen's 5150,
that's great.
Candlemass, Epicus, Dumicus, Metallicus.
It's a great name.
Queensryche's Rage for Order.
Yeah.
and Rats Dancing Undercover.
Yeah, that was definitely another one that I considered.
But probably the best one, if I had to guess, would have been Steve Winwood's Back in the High Life.
That's a great album too. Steve Winwood, one of my all-time favorites as well. Like I said, it was every week now is, we go through this, and every year it just becomes more and more. And again, that's not even branching out to pop and country so much as just like rock. It becomes harder and harder to make those picks each and every week. But great stuff.
You got
week.
Weird Al's Polka Party.
Weird Al, I would almost bet you will show up at some point during this vault countdown. Like, that's a good one, but like, I know there are a couple that are coming up in the 90s that will almost certainly, I'll pick at least one, because like Running with Scissors is one of my all-time favorite Weird Al albums. Was Amish Paradise the name of the album that was on, or was that on? That's a good question. We'll have to look that up.
Pull up his discography here because I don't remember off the top of my head.
Running with Scissors was one of my favorite Weird Al albums. That definitely could get picked. From
Bad Hair Day.
Bad Hair, of course. Yes,
Yeah.
Bad Hair Day. That's another great one as well. So Polka Party's great. Did that have Living with a Hernia on it?
Yes.
That's a great track. But I will probably save a Weird Al pick for one of the ones that I really listen to.
Yeah, I kind of feel like Bad Hair Day people loved, but I kind of feel like the next couple albums didn't quite get that same level, Running with Scissors and Poodle Hat. But
Yeah.
both were really good. Let's see, Albuquerque being on Running with Scissors, which
Love
is a
that.
tremendous song. Probably one of my favorite covers or his parodies of his. It's all about the Pentiums.
Yeah.
I mean, that's tremendous.
And, I have Mandatory Fun, which was one of his modern albums. And, like, that was really good as well. And that includes Jackson Park Express, which is definitely a spiritual successor to Albuquerque with his long, drawn-out story of him riding this train. And then there's, a song that feels like was it like Peter, Paul, and Mary or something, kind of that vibe. It's basically a song about a bunch of like catchphrases in business, but I can't remember the name of the song. We'll get to that when we get there. But Weird Al, definitely very important in my music fandom. Definitely will show up at some point in the vault. But we're going to bring this week's proceedings to a close here on the Nerdcast Empire. Great to have Chris back live with us this week, and great to have Mike in the studio as always. Great stuff from everybody this week here on the Nerdcast Empire. Don't forget to check out our website, nerdcastempire.com. Don't forget, we'll be back Thursday night for some anime music, and that's one you definitely want to catch live because there are no guarantees that any of those songs won't get muted on a VOD. So you definitely want to be here for live anime music Thursday night, 7 o'clock. We're going to be talking about more of our favorite anime themes. Big thanks to Stove Lake Media for their continued support of our podcast each and every week. We'll be back on Sunday night in our regular time for another episode of Music Weekly when we will look at the music from July the 5th. That's going to wrap things up for the entire crew and for everyone who joined us tonight and who joins us on the VODs as well. Big thank you to all of you, and we will see you next time. Don't forget to join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.